Madness. Right, okay, welcome everyone. Slight change of schedule. Tom unfortunately had to take time away, so I had to jump in the last minute, and there's nothing like having an unscripted dive in and let's figure out something to talk about. So, top of the mind at the moment, obviously, is the new content builder solution. There's been a lot of chat on the Discord since we set up a new channel, and everyone's been trying things and doing things and breaking things, and then building. Chris Harris Turtle has already been trying to build extensions to help people migrate, and we're taking a lot of that feedback on board, and we're trying to do things. But ultimately today, let's talk more about it. Okay, so things that are in there, we're going to try some stuff. It might not work. The whole point of this is that we're going to hack together. We're taking your feedback and questions, and obviously then the doorbell's going to ring as I start streaming. Let me just shout upstairs to my lovely wife. Lord knows if that message got through. We can listen to my dog serenade whoever's at the door and ask them what on earth's going on. Also, word to the wise as well. I had some internet issues actually last night and this morning, because it dropped out and then it came back in and then dropped off again. So I have a backup just in case, but that's just my phone. And let's get on, and hopefully that situation will get resolved. Right, so okay, I need to now, unfortunately, because my internet dropped out, it means I lost my connection to my screen. So there we go. Right, good old MonoGame. So what we're talking about here, if those who have missed out on sort of the shorts and the other videos we're putting on, quick little recap. So obviously we have the content pipeline, and this is MonoGame's asset pipeline. This is how we manage content, how we get things in, how we manage them. Unity has a similar system, or Real system, Godot has, and it all comes down to how do we get the raw assets and content into your solution. So as the process goes, we get the raw assets, we define what we want to load and how we want to load it. We then, at build time, so if you're building for Android, building for Windows DX, GL, consoles, you name it, we then package that content in a format that is suitable for that platform. Now, usually have different serialization techniques, shaders need compiling in a certain way, content needs to be packaged differently, and the content pipeline handles all of this. And the new content builder system improves this greatly, because we do away with the old tool and editor, and we're now just doing a code first approach, which is what we're digging into today. But from then, once your content's compiled, everything's the same. So we package it up with the game, so your executable and your content, or your APK, AVB, or your IPA, or whatever the runtime is for whichever platform it is. The content's slapped alongside it, it ships off, and then at runtime, the project simply goes, content pipeline, give me an asset. We try and make it as simple as possible. But also, XNA provided a ton of capabilities in this area, because even though they knew kind of what content was out there, how they used, what they could use, lots of different projects and things to call from Game Studios and such. So they knew how to handle texture, different texture formats, different audio formats, models. They did what they could, but they recognized that they didn't know everything. Or most point, everyone had different ways of doing things, and sometimes that was not necessarily the way they did it. There you go, Chris. There you are. So you'll go call out. Well, we will try to visit MonoGame.Extended today to play around some extensions. So I might call on your help. But anyway, so the assets are loaded, and you start using them in the project almost in a very similar and safe way. Now I'm using the same deck as I did for the last one, so we can skip it. Get rid of the editor. So for those of you who are not aware of, maybe tune into the sort of sessions, what is the new content builder? The content builder is effectively the new way to build content in MonoGame. It's code first. It makes debugging and using the project a lot easier. If you're building extensions, in other words, if you're having custom ways of handling the content, it's also a lot easier. We're noticing some from the chats in the channel that one concern is about migration. So some projects have a lot of content. So I think the current consensus, I'll put my hat in the game, is that we're probably going to extend the old editor so that if you've got a lot of content in your project and it's all configured the way you need to work it, then we're going to have a little exporter which will create you a builder class, which has all the definitions for how you want to do it, copied one-to-one from how you've got it set up in the MGCB, in the content builder editor. It's then up to you of how you then clean that up and structure, because being code first, we've got a lot more flexibility how we're going to handle things. If we've got time, we're going to go through some of the sort of best practices for how you would package your content in your solution, kind of the same way that most of the other engines and frameworks do. So yes, you can dump everything to one folder and then figure out what you want to do with it, but it's better to make it like your life easier by simply saying, well, I'll put all textures in a textures folder, then I can change how those work. Or there's all textures for a specific level, and this is how they work. Or giving things like prefixes or suffixes based upon, well, this is a normal model, but I need it to be handled this way. And then allow you to then create rules, which they simply say, right, if I find this type of content, I handle it this way. If I find this content, this way. But only if you need to make changes or alterations to how the process works. So by default, the content builder will just build. You have a project, you put the assets into a folder, and it will just process them. And it's only those exceptions, those changes to the defaults, where you need to provide kind of overrides to say, well, no, this particular texture, I need to have it pre-mulled by an alpha. I need to change what the color, how the colors are handled. I've got this model. It needs to use this processor and importer to how it's going to handle it. Or however, we'll try and go through as much as we can within roughly an hour. And I'll be leaning on you, the community, to jump in, ask questions. By all means, this is new. It's coming in preview in 3.8.5. So it's there to test. Build with your projects. Tell us what's wrong. Tell us what doesn't work. Tell us what kind of friction points there are. And all of this will go to improvements. So when it gets finalized and published in 3.8.6, it should be a lot better. So did I have my slides in here? That makes sense. Okay, yeah. Okay. Go on, next slide. There you go. So some of the common questions we have today, and this list is getting bigger. And I'm going to go back to the channel to see where all the right things come up. So if you've got an existing MonoGame project, do you need to have to start a brand new project to get this new content way of building things? No. I'd recommend looking back at the streams that we've already done about how to do this, where effectively all you're going to do is adding a new console project to your solution. We have a template for this already, which we're working on. I did have a PR for a blank starter kit and a new blank 2D game start kit, which is the same as the 2D blank start kit and the 2D start kit today, but using the content builder. So you can also, if you want to, you can set up both projects, look them side by side, and compare them if you wish. I'm looking at chat and just groaning. Well, no, you simply add this project to it. You move or copy your content over to it. You make sure it builds, and then you're simply changing your runtime project to use that instead of the old content pipeline reference, and removing some stuff. So all those steps are fully online. There's a video for that already. In fact, I should. Okay, let's find that and show that so people know where to see it. Funny, the MonoGame channel where you can see everything that goes on. Let's see, we've got some videos here. So there should be. There we go. Oh, they're short. So here we've got this 3-part short, which is 1, 2, 3. which walks through creating a content project, customizing it to tailoring your content in a way, and then also then connecting your project to it. And then I think there's also a more longer form video. There it is, the content builder getting started project. It's a bit bigger. And that is, again, beginning to end, how to add the project to your solution, how to configure it, how to add your content, and then how to build. And there's a few other little tips and tricks I think I threw in there at the time. Right. Will this affect my existing extensions? So the content pipeline has the ability to write your own customized way of handling content. And that's been around for years. We're going to look back in time at how XNA used to do it, which is pretty much the same way that MonoGame does it today. And we'll get to look at some, we're trying to make extensions and things. We'll get there, we'll get through. And effectively, no. If anything else, this is going to make it a lot easier, because adding a content pipeline extension to the MGCB editor was painful, because you either had to have it pre-built, you then had to have a reference to it, and then if you wanted to debug it, they created problems because they had to change the reference to something else and back again. Is a lot of, but adding them to it was problematic. Building the content, then if you start having issues with the content as you're building it, again, there's friction. The new solution does away with all of that. At the end of the day now, it's simply either a .NET reference, and that can either be another project in your solution, or what we kind of recommend is you actually write your extensions. Oh, baby, all this week. You write your extensions in your content project. At the end of the day, this is now going to be a console application to build your content. So it should contain everything you need to build your content. With the beauty of that is that once it's built, along with any references and dependencies it's got with it, if you've got someone else, an artist, building your content, you simply give them the exe. Tell them to follow these rules, and they will build their content. They'll get runtime reports of when things work or don't. They'll see it working. If you want to write a little mini editor so you can see it, it's great. But they don't need any special tools. They don't need to set up their environment in a specific way. They just run the exe. Can I build my MonoGame project without rebuilding content? I forget what I put on this now. Yes. So what this is referring to is that the age-old problem with the old MGBC editor is that it was hardwired into your actual game project. So every time you built it, it built content. And where this really starts slowing things down is if you had a lot of content, it then took a long time. If you just want to run your game in debug, it was building everything again. It did cache sometimes, but generally it keeping me awake. It made build times longer. It was problematic. Great. No. All that's gone now. It's now completely in your control. Either you can build it with your project. The caching is much improved with the new system as well. And we're also continuing to refine that. So there's still a few friction areas, especially around caching. Some of the community have already spotted these things. But again, we're working hard to address these. But ultimately, it shouldn't get in the way. So if you want to run it with your project, you can. But you don't have to. You can have it completely disconnected, build your content separately, have it put into your folder, and then just run your development game. And this should make development times a lot faster. That also leads into this next point about automation. And I'm biting the bit. I just need to find the time. So because it's just a console app now, you can put it into an automation pipeline, have it so that you check in your content. It builds automatically and then tells you what it's doing. And then when you go to release your game, it's going to build the game, build the content, slap them together, and ship it. Oh, won't that be nice? No tools, no problematic references. It cuts out the whole problem with the .NET tool config. I can't wait to see that go. And yes, the ultimate aim is that this is going to make your life as special as a game developer. Gamers will still have their same experience, they won't notice. The whole point of this is to make it easier. Right, I did actually have the answers on there. Now we'll. Okay, I can't just jump to that slide. There we go. So one of the few things we're going to say for the 3.8.5 preview. So it is a preview release. It's not final. So we don't recommend you putting it into your finished game and shipping it. Realistically, it shouldn't make any difference. But you just need to make sure you test things. You can. We're not going to stop you, because at the end of the runtime project, it's just the assets and your game shipping out. That's no difference. But obviously, in your building your content, if there's some minor differences to how it used to work, which is what most people are on edge about. So is there a change from how the MGVC editor built things and this does? Technically, no. But if you've not accounted for all the different properties and settings that you've set on it previously and not configured them right in the new project, then you could have issues. So we're just saying be careful. And ultimately, it's a case of the whole point of this preview is to wake up. I should have slept last night. To test this out. We want this hardened, tested, faster, going faster, making people's lives easier, and we're going to have tons more content on this in the future. Right, so let's get rid of that. So the old content, ironically, the old content bot, in some ways, people have noted that this takes us back to how content used to be built in the XNA days. And let's see, can we make this even bigger? And this, I found that this is great, is a nice little diagram of what the content pipeline is, where you've got your source assets here. In fact, can we make this even bigger? There. You got your source assets, so whether they're model files, whether they're textures, whether sprites, XML, whatever. They have the built-in, what we call the importers. So we have an XBX and importers, which are just the two default formats that we're using at the time. We have effect importers for loading shaders. We have texture importers for textures. You get the picture. But there's also one, I'm going to cover this because it's sort of one of those unhidden, or the hidden secrets, really, the XML importer, where if you write a class in a certain way, and then write an XML file in a certain way, you get an instance of that class in your game, preloaded with however you do it. I've used this many a time for different projects, and it was an easy way of just having dynamic configuration without having to do a lot of legwork. The downside was it was XML. XML is not brilliant for that, but it's better. I do apologize. So when an importer runs, it then creates basically it loads everything into the object model for XNA or MonoGame in this case, where models are broken down into the different node contents, the meshes, the indices, the geometry, the textures, the materials, the effects. All of that is sort of brought into a runtime object model inside the content pipeline engine. Same with effects, same with textures. Texture actually become just the binary serialized data that you're going to use. Fonts generally also get, depending on in MonoGame, if you have a sprite font file and a two-track font, it'll pull that into it as well. So then when we do the processing, it then creates a bitmap, it creates a font map of the font ready for consumption in your game. So then we have the next component here, which is the content processors. They do all the legwork of taking all the raw content and turning it into an output format that's going to be used in your runtime game. Now, I know a lot of these will match up, especially with models themselves, creating just what is the model definition in XNA. And then that, when it's serialized and then deserialized in your runtime game, is what you actually get, all the geometry, the textures, materials, effects altogether. Same with shaders, but obviously that when the shader is compiled within the MonoGame system, is that's targeted for whichever the platform was for. So you're going to get a DirectX shader or HLSL for DirectX, and for OpenGL, you're going to get a GL shader. And it does that all for you based upon what the structure of the content is. Granted, that's also usually the source of most issues and complaints in building shaders, because you're building it for cross-platform. And then we got sprite fonts and other things. And then in your runtime game, you've also got all the definitions. So all of that works great. And the content builder, effectively, all it's doing is that it's making all of this side into an actual executable that you can run as many times as you like without having to all the editor and everything else in there, and lots of funky things. So let's have, if I've got, where are we? Let's pull up the, which one? That's the Ascent one. No, I don't want that one. I want this one. Okay, so this is the 3D platformer sample. It's available to all our sponsors at the moment, and hopefully this will get released soon to the wider public. And I should be able to run this. There's a good test. Can I run this? No, I can't, because something's missing. What have I not pulled down? Oh well, just goes to show I can't run this. I have run this before. Odd. Okay, someone's been doing some tweaking. But in this case, so this is what our content builder project is. Rather than an editor and just a single old configuration file, we get this, which is a simple definition, very simple program. And all it's going to do is initially, it's going to include everything. And then you're going to override it and can change it with what you want to do. So, for instance, here we say, right, all FBX files, they're going to use the FBX importer, and they're going to use this custom mesh animated model processor, which is something that Dean wrote, because the models that are actually included in this sample come from the whole Kenny's sample. They're not mesh animation, not using skeletal animation, they're actually using deformation within the actual mesh itself. I mean, if we want to, we can actually then go look at this. So the FBX importer pulls that in and forms that into this structure here. So we get the structure of everything that's been imported. And then we're changing. No, okay. What do you mean no? It's not liking me today. There's help. There's the processor. And then this is what a content processor is looking like, where it's taking in this context, the data that you're doing, all the key information for what it is, and then we're going through of processing all the animations into clips. We're building these into animations that are on there, and then applying all the different vertex transformations on it, and then we're also tagging the content and also creating a bounding box, it seems. And then what you get out of that then is a content definition, which is going to get used by a project, and then when it's running the game and running it through the processes, that's what it's doing. So we're simply just taking the raw data as it's understood and then processing. That's easy. And there's some helpers in here as well. Granted, you know, this is much more complex example that you would normally have. But in essence, FBXs and also GLB files, for some reason, oh yeah, we don't have a GLB importer, but obviously being imported, they must still work with the FBX importer, which is interesting. Then, okay, so we're also then going to copy all the JSON files. We don't have a JSON interpreter or importer, so we're simply going to copy those over, and at runtime we're pulling them in, although you could simply write an extension to do an actual JSON interpreter. Okay, OGG songs, we're also then going to use the OGG importer and the default sound effect processor, and this is also a key thing as well. So when in the old MGCB editor, you could select a specific model and they could change parameters and variables and settings on it. In this instance, Dean has actually set the scale for this character model to then be 100. That means that the source model must be really small or really large, one of the two. But effectively here is that what we're saying is that use the default FBX importer for this file, but in the processor, we're actually going to specify a parameter. Granted, yes, this is supposed to be a little bit more finicky than clicking on the screen and changing an option on it. But this gives us an option to all the different processor variable properties on here. So let's have a look what we got here. No, it's not recognized in the project because it's not built. So what can we look at? So look at the processor. We can go to, this is using model processor, and we can go to our documentation. Where's our screen? There we go. Nope, not that one. Where's our window? That one. We go to go to here. Go to learn. Go to the API reference, and we can pull up the model processor. And here we can see all the different properties. So we can change the color key information. So if there's any actual color blending going on, whether or not we're actually using it, the default effect. So by default, it will use the basic effect for models when it's doing it, which also means that it sets up default lighting characteristics and things like that. We can generate bitmaps, tangent frames, lots of different options here that we can set. So obviously we can do rotation. Now this is an interesting one to call out. So in the model processors right now, there is a known issue with the Ascent update that was done. They did do the change. It can alter how your model's rotated when it's imported, which seems to be a difference from back in the days of MonoGame 3.8.2 and 3. So starting from 4, we notice some subtle differences. Now you can handle this by just having the processor option and changing the rotation values so that at import, the model is then automatically rotated by whatever the offset or difference is. So that way it doesn't change your runtime project. You don't need to change any code. You're just changing it as source. And you do it here by actually changing one of the rotation values. So Dean here is setting the scale, but then there's other options we can change here. So that in here, where we're going, go back here. So in our builder, we're simply setting that variable as we see fit for when we're processing content, and then it's ready to use for in your game. We can look at slightly more. So yeah, if we drop over to the Ascent Demo one now, which was over here, you can see here that Tom's put a lot more rules in here about different things that we're actually doing. And also it's pointing out a key part about when you're managing assets in your content. So in here, we're actually, all the power-ups are in one specific folder. So we know all the power-ups in this project are set in a specific way. So all the power-ups need to be scaled down by a factor of 4. So that we're actually using them the same way. However, the source assets are, they all fall under the same bucket and can all be processed the same way. I don't have to set this for every single different power-up. And if we have a look, let's have a look here, power-ups. Here you can see there's lots of them. So there's an energy, oh, we've got FBX and max files. Look at that. And we've got the missile. Well, I think there's actually 2. So yeah, this is just working on the 2 FBX files. But it doesn't matter because it's whatever's in this folder, this is then what's going to be applied to it. But only if it's an FBX. Let's see where else we got here. So yeah, see if we can do some setting the scale on other options. We're making sure we're copying all the XML files. We're excluding HLSL files for some reason. And also, more importantly, in case of so in this, you can have it so that your artist can leave all the source content in these folders. It didn't care in the old MGPC editor system because if you didn't have a reference to it, it didn't include it at all. But as this is now looking and getting all of the assets within the folder, it's getting all of them. So then we need to specifically say that, fine, my artist is leaving in. Nope, not smaller. You know, my artist has left in the original 3ds Max files that we're actually using. So don't process these. Ignore them. We don't need them. Right. Okay. So yes. Ignore the HSL files. So if there are any HSL files in here, I'm going to guess in here. But yep, there's a shadow HLSL, which obviously someone's been using for testing and working on. We're simply saying to the builder, we know it's there, we see it's there, just ignore it. And this is how you're going through. You're actually building rules around your content and managing how they work and looking at them to see how they're working. And also you can see here now there's also another custom mount. You do an additional model processor. And this one's a little bit more complex because it knows that each model, if we look in here, so look at the power-ups, for instance, is using it. So with each model file, We're also specifying that there are other files to go with it. There's a texture or diffuse map with it. There's a normal map, a specular map, and a glow map. And the way that in this project is worked out is that they're given a suffix of an extension which tells it what kind of file it is. So in the processor, we're reading in the model, we're reading in the textures, and then if the textures meet these criteria, the processor is going to handle them differently and apply them to the effect. So if we wander through, we build on the mesh content, we add in collision data for all the meshes themselves. We'll actually build an actual collision mesh. The personal hierarchy. And then here we go. So we start applying the materials in the shader. So as it's imported, it's processing them in, and then the project has got those in there eventually. The default model processor does do some of this, but not to this degree. And it also allows us to do more customizations by saying, so yes, it's a suffix of C, but then once you've redone it, we need to rename it and call it something else once it's imported. Although Tommy's working an interesting issue here that when right now in the content build, if we're building this model and it's using these images, it's then building the shader that's being used, which I'm going to have to assume is the normal mapping shader. It's actually building that many times over. So for each model that's being pulled in, it's going to then build a shader to then build the textures, and then gets to the next model and goes, right, well, I've got to build the shader, I've got to build the textures, and this is causing the pipeline itself to back up and lock up because we're having so much content being done and we're redoing the same thing over and over again. So one of the issues that Tom is working on is to actually improve this and make it better. No questions yet. So either everyone's stunned or is amazed what we're going through and see what we're doing here. So what can we get to next? So yeah, there's the content pipeline. Now, when you're building content itself, you can actually define your content pipeline extensions. Let's see, the old Extended documentation has got, there we go. The documentation. I should bring some of this over into MonoGame because we have some, but not all of this documentation where, well, I've actually got that sample open here. And this talks you through how to write these extensions. So if you need to do something different and handle something differently when the content's coming in, especially through the new content system, you'll need an extension. Now, the difference being that in the past, there had to be a separate project. It's content pipeline extension. You then had to build it and then release or debug. You then had to reference it in your project. A lot of mess. Now, the recommendation is, like you've seen in the Ascent project there, and also, as you see here, is that this is our builder project and our extensions. Oh, there we go. Our extension is with the builder. The code is all compiled with it. This makes it a lot easier to debug. So if there's an issue when this is processing and it's building content and something's not being output quite right or it's not working quite right, you can simply run this project in debug. Why is that not covering that? Yeah, I don't know why this is also messed up. This was working previously. Interesting. Both of those projects for me are not working very well. We will improve that and work it out. But effectively, you'll be able to take this, debug it, start debugging, and then as the content's being built and as it's being processed, you can break. I could go and put a breakpoint in here. I could check all the values that are working in a much more simple fashion. With the old content editor, it was possible, but you had to be certain. You had to be facing a specific direction. The wind had to be rolling the right way for everything to work. Invariably, what ended up happening was you actually had to go back to the source for the editor, run that in debug to then open up your content project, to then go and try and build, and then have your extensions clicked in. It was painful. This is going to make life so much easier. But in this, so if we're building an extension, and the extension does look quite good about the fact that you're specifying. This is a nice little walkthrough of. Oh, I can't move that. Let's have a look at the tips for a great one. This documentation, which is still online, you simply need to go to actually. Where are we? Windows Phone SDK. The Extended Game Studio 4 documentation, it's all on here. A lot of it has been migrated already over to MonoGame, which is this getting to know MonoGame, where we have lots of what is. So what are specific features of MonoGame, whether it's the content pipeline. I can see what are custom importers, which is a lot of the documentation that comes over, updated and refreshed for how MonoGame works with it. So you can look at all the different properties and things. And then you also have the how-to guides. And then these things get a bit more interesting where once you know how a feature is and what it works, then there's a lot of documentation here for how you can do it. So we can extend the content processor and actually building your own processors and importers for how you're doing things. And it walks you through all the different options, how you're changing them, what the options and change things are that are in there, how you can alter things like compression and change how they're going to be working, so that when you're importing and changing things, it's very useful. But one of the sort of more interesting ones is if I pull up, no, not MonoGame.Extended. We'll come back to that. So in the Extended Game Studio Archive, which is another fantastic resource, it's got all of the content samples and utilities. We've been slowly migrating, or the community has been migrating a lot of these over to MonoGame as well. And in this one, this is the XML particle example. Now, why I call this out specifically, and you know what, I might even try doing this in the content builder. In fact, I don't really need to. So in this sample itself, what you do is you're setting up a class here. It's class called particle settings. And we've got a lot of options, variables here, time span. And this is basically describing everything that we need to be able to control particles. Now, where this really becomes useful is if I go into the actual sample. Let's make this bigger again. Is that big enough for everyone to see on the screen? So if I go into the actual sample itself and look at the content, if I looked at this now, there is not a content pipeline extension for doing this, because MonoGame and Extended and MonoGame both have a native XML importer, provided you structure it in a specific way. So if I look at this now, this explosion settings XML, blank XML file, critically it needs to have this Extended content header. And then after this, basically you're defining, I'm going to create an asset. It's using this class from this namespace, which has to 100%, and believe you me, match, whereas our particle setting, there we go, both the namespace and the class name for the content that you're trying to import. And then all we've got here now is that, okay, so right, I've defined a lot of different data which is going to get imported in the project, and here it is. Basically, there's all the options being set up and sent in there. And MonoGame does this as well. So as long as those match one-to-one, when I import it, I will get a class definition, which is actually an instance of a class definition for this data. So I do content.load, a particle settings using the explosion settings XML file. That will give me an instance of a class using this XML data, which is immensely useful. So long as your data works with XML, so it's one of its not failing points, but limitations. It's not as fluid as JSON. If you wanted to have index, or if you wanted to have arrays of data in here, it got really finicky because of how XML deserializes lists, and especially dictionaries and things like that. You create a world of problems. As long as your data is simple, this works brilliantly, and it's fantastic for that. As you can see here, it's like I've gone and defined lot of different, or I've not, Microsoft went and defined several different particle effects, all with different settings. So this like Mac particles has been changed, the duration has been set up, and all the colors and things like that. So I don't have to define those in my game. I don't need a lot of extensions to build this particle effect in this way. Although obviously, if you're watching Open Hours this week, Chris has done a fantastic demo of his new Ember system in MonoGame.Extended, and hands down, that's so fantastic. By the way, I did note, Chris, and I hope you're going to change it. There's no content extensions in there to load that. You have to do it in there. Anyway, I digress. But this is a fantastic way of doing it. However, if I wanted to then change that and have this so that I wanted the data in a different format, and I wanted to use JSON, then you'd write your own custom content importer to pull this data in, and then you might use actually one of the standard export processors to then put it into a class. So let's have a look. That in the not here. I want to go to the source. So look. Let's go off script. Not that I have a script. I'm just riffing here. So content pipeline, and this is again the biggest benefits of MonoGame itself. All the source, all the code, everything you need. You're not sure about how something works, or you want to extend it, because one of the things that came up in the chat this week was someone wanted to take an existing processor. So I really got, look at this, I'm flying all over the place. Where are we? No, I had that up already. No, I had the list of content importers there. Where are we? Let's have a look. Getting to know. What is content pipeline? What are the standard content importers and process? There we go. So you go here, and basically these are the ones that are built in already. Just wheeling it back. So we've got an FBX importer, we've got shaders for effects, textures, an X importer. X importer, not an X file or a DirectX model. It's not really as relevant these days. Most things are FBX or OBJ, but also OBJ. The FBX importer also works with OBJs. Wavefront files. You got. It'd be interesting to write a Max one. So you can have 3DX Max or a Blender importer. I think I did see someone had actually done an importer for Blender files. So like in Unity, where you can drop a Blender file in and it recognizes and does work, how it just works, you could do the same in MonoGame as long as you got an importer that works with that, because then it would just do it into the model output format, and then nothing else is different. I do believe there is, or I have seen a project out there which is actually specifically written to do an importer for things like GLB models. I guess probably to handle all the different animations and things are in there. So the open asset importer, what on earth was that? Okay, so it's actually doing importers and asset. Anyway, then once it's imported, you then got like the model processor, the pass through, which is interesting because occasionally it's just import it and pass it through. Don't do anything with it. And that's what's used for XML files. So it reads the data in, creates an instance of a class of what the data is, and then stores it really just for loading up later. And fonts, so many fonts, textures, and the localized font. Now, where were we going with this? I forget. Still no questions, and we're diving around. But anyway, so within all these systems themselves and how we're building these things, you can do a lot in there, and there's a lot of flexibility and functionality in there for how we're going to do things. Let's see what we're doing around. Yes, we're going to look at source. So if you're working and you want to extend it. Oh, Chris, you missed it. We were calling you out. It's rotten. It was terrible. Sorry, we weren't. Although we did have a call out to Ember from the open hours. So you missed that. So if you want to dig into the source for how the content builder system's working and you find something, maybe the way we shipped it and it doesn't work the way you want it and you want to actually add an extension or something, all of the source in here for the content builder system is here. Ignore that line for now, honest. Yes, we are working on an asset server for the builder system, but don't get too excited. It won't be in the preview because it still needs a lot more work. But you can see here, this is how all the actual content build is made up. You can see everything, how everything is, what properties are open. One community member came back and asked if once the content's been built and it's got the whole catalog, could that be exposed? It doesn't do that today. So when you run the builder, it does initial, or when it builds the cache and it goes through and it's doing all those different content includes, it's building one of these as a content collection. And that gives you a list of all the content. And someone noted that, you know, the current content collection is private. And they wonder if you can open that up. And the easier answer to that is it's almost easier because there's so many different ways that can work or how to handle it. Because you've got your builder and you've got access to content collection in the builder, you could simply dump that out to a file from there. Hello, welcome to the show. And here today we're going through all the new content builder system with MonoGame, transforming and improving how content's built in your solution, and riffing off what we can do. And so you can see here, this is all the source for the builder. But then what we're here is that, okay, so in the content pipeline, we've also got in the graphics folder, where are we? There's all the different asset types that we support. No, it's not relevant for us. For the processors and importers. There, sorry. In a process, who'd have thought it'd be in a process as well? But it's fine in that case. So we have processors, but not importers. Where are the importers? Oh, look, we guess we can just. No, it's the tests, content pipeline. They're down here. Now we're going to refactor that at this point in time. But anyway, so okay, so the open asset input, and so if you want to build, if you don't like what the standard importers are doing and you want to build your own, and you just want to know how the current ones are doing it, so you can go into the source and you can see here we've got the open asset importer. It handles, look at this, a lot of files. So this is just piping something direct to the open asset import library. It's going to load it in. I think the other model processor as well use this at the back end. So you have the all important when we're defining a content pipeline extension, we're having a content porter, which takes the data in. There's lots of documentation. Go away, symbols. You're in my way. All the type data. Interesting. FVX pivot. Okay. In fact, this is probably too complex to look through at this point in time. Let's try and find one that's a bit easier to understand. The texture importer. So here you can see what the standard text importer. This is all the different formats that we handle by default. We do use sort of open source 3D libraries for handling all these different types, but we manage what those are and how they work. And you can see there's lots of different type of text you can handle. As a default content importer definition, then at point of import, it gets the context of it gets the file that we're working with, and then the current imported context for what that is. We're then getting the file. If it's a DDS, we use the DDS importer. Otherwise, we're creating some content. We're reading the bitmap in, changing based upon how the content it is, how we're facing. Low. Interesting. That keeps happening. Don't know why. And also, we have face or basically all having like map levels of how those texture works. So you can see how these currently work. If you need reference or example of how to actually build your own, because you how they're working, one of the most common scenarios. Let's see, let's go find this now. Some old documentation I had, which I tried to update up. I was planning to do this later in the week, but with Tom's absence, I've jumped in. And let's see. I had a good example in here of. Did I have some content on here? No, I don't think that's got in what I need. I mean, there's a lot of documentation here around case of how you structure things. So what kind of import data is, how you're then reading it, parsing it. Did I have a JSON importer here? Oh, look, tiled. That's probably exactly how the MonoGame.Extended tiled extension works. Let's have a look. What was this example here? It says Hey Chris, this might look familiar. This is how old these docs are about how importing tile folders. Where we're actually then. So we look at this. So here we can see we use a standard XML document import. So I'm in this content pipeline extension. It recognizes there's an XML file, and the file name is called .tmx. So the content pipeline will see this. No, this is something I did ages ago, Chris. This isn't extended. This is my stuff from when I used to have time to play. So in here in this content importer, it looks for a .tmx file. So if I put a .tmx file in my folder, this importer would be able to pick it up. We parse out the XML that's within that, and then start defining a new document where we're building a map, and then we're reading all the data from there. And as you can see here, this is where I'm taking a file, I'm reading it into my importer, I'm building up a data structure of what is in it. Now, this could just as easily be JSON. So I'd use a JSON deserializer to bring the data in, handle the data I want to do it, bringing it into a pre-processing format. So then when I can pass it to my processor with the data model that's in there. Yes, I will point to that, yes. MonoGame.Extended is the only one that sort of has official tile support, but I think because it has so many issues, is it so many issues? It has problems, it's being overhauled, and Chris is doing a fantastic job working it already. A lot of people use tiled for pulling in data using that editor. If you're not aware already, let's have a look. Can we change to show people what we're talking about here? There we go. Tiled. Great little open source tool used for building 2D maps. So you can imagine like infinite maps for like Stardew Valleys or a platformer. Yeah, because it does work, but it's very clunky. But he's working hard, and we trust Chris because we've seen him, we've seen other things. It's been fantastic since he took over MonoGame.Extended. So many things are going on. But tiled allows you a nice little mini editor to do. Maybe I'll throw that up since you're throwing it in. And yeah, in the MonoGame.Extended tile, it uses a very specific format. It just can be hard to pull out. So you can use tiled and then create maps, creating external tools to do things. What is great about this is it supports different layers of tiles. It allows you to have different effects, or what it is, ignore this extensibility. It just means you can extend the tile editor, not create scripts in your project. Look, the screen's made with tiled. And then MonoGame.Extended, where I will give a shout out since I've got, where are we there? MonoGame.Extended, it's on GitHub. And it's also got all the stuff in here. So I did pull up the documentation, Chris, honest. So we got the documentation, and this is again another big working process in some areas. So unfortunately, a tile map does need updating. We'll call it out. There you go. Particles doesn't, because he's working on the M editor. So MonoGame.Extended itself as an external project. We like MonoGame. The MonoGame Foundation loves to support our community and all the hard work they do when they're building things. They're doing this to support MonoGame. While as much as I say, keep supporting MonoGame, if you're also using other open source tools, bear in mind, support them as well, because without them, you're using tools and things that are built on what you're doing and how you're working. I should point out this way in that very same vein. If you are watching us on YouTube, make sure you give us a like and subscribe. If you're watching us on Twitch, hit the bell, follow us. It all goes to help support and grow the channel so that we can get more content and more things out there, and so on. So, highly recommend looking at what MonoGame.Extended is. Especially, there are several content pipeline extensions in here as well. Well, installing it is simple as just adding a NuGet package. That's because it's in there. And in his, there's level extension projects there in here for handling different content in certain ways. And if MonoGame.Extended doesn't do something, all the tools and all the source are available online for you to go and build your own. It makes life a lot simpler, a lot easier for building these things out. But anyway, let's filter back to where we were talking about. Oh no, we had the docs. So this is what these things do in the background, and this is where the real power of content pipeline also comes in. Is that where normally I'd have to go and write this in my runtime project? You run the risk there is that if something goes wrong at runtime, invariably the only thing that happens is your game crashes, which is really bad. Apparently, I'm told. But if you can push as much of this off to the left, no, it's losing connection. I think I've actually got connections issues. I've noticed my broadband provider was playing up last night, but I have a phone backup. That I did see that. Then explains why this keeps flaking. Interesting. Anyway, I digress. So in these case of you can control how you're importing what this data is, and by pushing as much to the left as possible, it means all your testing earlier. So like we write unit tests for code to make sure the code and things work, you need to treat your content, your assets in the same way. You need to ensure that any conditions, any structure, and any validations need to happen. You need to push them as far to the left as possible. Now, with the builder project and also writing your own extensions and importers and processors, then you can do that, because in here is case if I could have validation so that whoever's writing my tile files, they use a feature that's been added to their own version of tile, which can happen. So it ends up putting an invalid value within it. Now, you're unawares at runtime that this is happening, so you're just importing it, running it, building it, and then suddenly half the textures don't render correctly, or everything's suddenly offset by 5 pixels to the left, and there's now a big black line. I've seen projects really fall over in that aspect. So where we try to stress and how the content builder project now helps is that you can put more and more of this validation of your content, your source, that's going to drive your game right to the point when you're building content. And it doesn't even have to be a game. It can actually be in your actual content project. So you can, like I say, you can give that to an actual content creator, or funky times. This could also be your tool for your passing to people who are writing user-generated content for your game. They can go do the assets they're going to do. They're going to run your tool for building their content. They don't have to find something to work, and hopefully it doesn't work. You can then write reports and things like that of how that content looks like. Is it too big? Is it too small? Any way to ensure that the source content you're putting in, the configuration that's going into that, is then going to be exactly how it needs to be when it's then imported into your game. And obviously, MonoGame runtime, you could run the content. A few people have come up and said, "Can I run the content builder at runtime?" And yes, you could, but you're going to create other problems in doing that, because You want to make your game run as fast as possible. Let's put something more interesting on the screen. There we are, the MonoGame website. You want to make your game run as fast as possible. You want reduce as much as you can the possibility of any unhandled exceptions or problems with data coming in, so that the runtime game is just running. And because it's just a game and then the content are files, you can add files at any point in time. MonoGame is extremely moddable in that respect. The big issue in the past was how to get that content packaged into where they could be shipped to your game. But giving it as a tool, as a way to actually just hand that to people, say, right, go build your content, write your configuration this way, have the tool even package up all the configuration to go with it. You'll then have all the XMB files that are actually built. I'm waving my hands as, can I make myself bigger? I didn't want to do that. Okay, no. I don't want to maximize. I don't even maximized. Oh, I can't bring myself down anymore. So turn down to here. There. No. I've broken that completely. Can I go back to share? Oh, okay. Well, there. Share my screen. Aha. There we go. There. That's how I make myself bigger. There. What's this doing now? I'm messing with my stream. I do apologize. I shouldn't really be doing this, but I'm doing this. Why is that now this big? There. Okay, that's better. So the end of it, your game's running on the whatever platform and it doesn't really matter what it is, because at the end of the day, it's like you'll have the program and the content is sitting alongside it. Now the content pipeline, there's no pre-registered thing. All it's going to do is a case of if you're going to load a specific piece of content, you're telling me the path of where it is. We can see that here so that's the building. When we're running our game now, there's the challenge. Can I find a place in here where we're loading? I can find a place where we're loading content because it's .load. Not load files, load content. No, we got predefined content. There we go. Right. When we're loading a runtime, all we're really doing is saying to the content manager, right, go and load me this type of file, and it's in this location. If you've got, and obviously this is just text. So if I have all the configuration on a known catalog of additional user-generated content or other assets that I can package from my game, they just need to be located in the right place. You tell the content system to go and load that content, and it will just work. You don't need to recompile the game or project it, how it works. However, that does put more emphasis on ensuring that the content you're going to upload and make available is formatted and checked and done the right way. So again, this is where the content builder itself is going to be a lot more useful, because you can apply those rules about how that's loaded right back at the very beginning when you're building the content. I think I've said that about 3 times now. So let's have a look. Okay, chat. Any questions apart from Chris? Yeah, we appreciate whether it's MonoGame or the content builder. I say it's going to be in preview in the next release of MonoGame. But by all means, get ready, package your things up, see how it works, see how it builds content. I'll be brutally honest. If you're doing a brand new project, I would probably use the content builder over using just the MGBC editor, because you'll get to learn how it works. The content is still being built, arguably in the same way. Most of it's because of the migration of how it works. And I am, now that I've actually got the automation working, we had a minor issue. Where we are. MonoGame. Yes, we had a minor issue here. You'll see lots and lots of red. because when DirectX Lens launched, it changed things. Who's doing that one? That was me. I got it working again. So now I just need to make sure I get that processed and imported. And what is that? What is this doing? Right. Okay. D is responding to a request I had. Yeah, and that's failing for the same reason. Yeah, thank you, .NET 10. It's done something, but we've got it building again now, and then we can work on improving it. So yeah, Dean's been playing. Something weird is going since .NET 10 was released. It's thrown a few things out of whack, and you'll find this in your not in the MonoGame project. So in the compiled MonoGame projects, everything's fine. MonoGame is built with .NET 8, which is all standard. As of 3.8.4.1, we recommend using .NET 9 in your client project, which is perfectly fine. MonoGame being .NET 8, your project being .NET 9, again, is perfectly fine. But again, this also highlights a good reason of why you test early. We've got so much automation and testing in MonoGame. It makes life interesting, to say the least. Right, we've hit the hour. Let's have a look. Any other question? Right, I'm now turning over to you, the community. Let's go over here. There we go. Cool. Can I be bigger? Can I be bigger again still? There we go. Like, subscribe, bell, all those things. Okay, fine. We'll go here. That's easier. Let's go to questions now, because we've talked a lot now about the content builder system, how the content pipeline works, how content pipeline extensions work, and trying to emphasize the need to test early, even with your content. So let's have a look. As for now, assets can be loaded per game level, but just within a specific context. Will this behavior be kept in this new approach? Are there any? That was one of the things I was going to try and talk about today, but kind of run out of time. So when you're organizing your content in your project, there are several methodologies you can use to organize it. Now, as we get to this new, in the past, with the MGVC editor, it was a case of, well, everything had to be registered manually and everything had to be set up individually. So it didn't really matter how you organize the structures and folders. It made sense just to however you wanted to do it. Now, with the new content builder system, you have a lot more power and flexibility so that you can customize how your content's processed. And that might change then how you organize and structure your content. So whether you put all videos into a specific folder so they can be processed by the video processor, and then just have one line in the build to say process videos. But generally speaking, you organize content in generally one of two ways. One is content by type. Now, Unity and Unreal both do this the same way, where they say, right, have a textures folder, a models folder, a config folder, resources folder, and then you'll just put the content relative to that element in there, and then spend 3 hours configuring it all. Is one way of doing it. In some MonoGame projects, what they actually do is they actually structure it by targets. So if I have a specific level and I've got content just for that level, then I'll put the content in that folder, and it might even have subdivisions of folders within there. Or another way is to have rather prefixes or suffixes around how you would process that content. That way you can define either a global or a localized rule to say, if the file's got this suffix, right, then use this processor. So let's put a code file in front of us. So I'll have to go back to, let's go back. Let's see, is this working again here? Yes. So if I go back to my builder, is this what we're talking about? Okay, so as you can see, it's a case of like I could put all power-ups in one folders, and then the FBX power-ups I will handle this way. The texture power-ups I might handle a different way, and so on and so forth. And also the same thing for like conversations or configuration or files. And rather than have to worry about changing everything, use wildcards to actually say, right, well, if it's in this location and it's called this, do this. Or all the files in this project that are FBX, do it this way. Now, you also know as well, this is something we kind of reiterate when you're building and trying with this, is that this is progressive. So we start with everything. So everything gets put into a bucket. It's going to be processed. If you do nothing else, it will just process that content as is. You're then effectively now updating that bucket to say, right, well, go back through and anything that's an FBX, then by default have this importer on. So that now goes, right, any FBX, it's scaled to and it's scaled to this value using these two import, this importer and this processor, everything. However, you'll notice then down here, I've got another one. It says, oh, right, well, but if it's an FBX and it's in the power-ups folder, actually you want to scale by this. So you can see I've actually got several almost competing things, but all that's happening is last one wins. So I've imported everything. I then say all FBXs get handled this way. I then say all FBXs in this folder get handled this way. And it's updating what it's doing. So then by the time you get to the very end, when you get to here, that's what you're processing. So whatever state it is, by the time it gets to here, that's where it does, which allows you to override things. But also, granted, when you're building this, I'll just add another concern or another consideration you need to watch as well, is that I could do one and then I could accidentally put down here, oh, well, I'm going to do another one. I'm forgetting it. So you need a bit of perseverance when you're doing this to also watch what you're doing. Generally speaking, in case I'll either use regions. Okay. However you feel about regions. My thing as well is if you're having to not regions, what are you doing? It's a region. I might have multiple, but hey. Name your regions and also close your region with the same name so that in most editors you see you can collapse it. Is this going to collapse? No, because it's not reading the project properly. So that then again, it's a point of contention yourself is as you're building your rules, organize your rules in a way that makes sense in the order they need to be processed. And then as you're then handling your content, build your rules to complement how your process works. If you want to have, instead of FBX, so let's see, SFC, so, oh no, EWR. So then it can say, well, all FBXs that start with power, the power ones, right, I want to scale them this way, then I might have a, oops. Equals that's not going to work, but there you go. Okay, so if it's a power up and it's powered this way, then set a color on it. Then if it's a different one, set it a different way. Applying default properties and sessions in it, but on a more global approach about how that's actually working, so that you control how this is working and what it's doing. All right. Any other questions? We've got people jumping in and out as they go. For those who joined right at the very end, you can go back and watch the rest of the stream. We've been talking about the new content builder system, how it works, what the different levels are, looking at having extensions and processors. I am going to follow up with more. There you go. More content around this because the content builder is such a huge thing to think about when you're changing and trying to put rules and processes and extensions and things in to manage your content. And also, I honestly will. I'm going to do a session on also putting it into automation and actually building like a GitHub Action workflow. So your content in the repository, and it goes and builds it. And out of that, you get basically a zip or a package of just all your asset files you're going to do and push them to somewhere else if you wish. Right. Oh, yeah, we're over time now. I know Tom usually goes for 2 hours, but I'm sticking to 1 for today. Mainly because this was last minute. Yeah. Okay, any other questions coming in? Last chance. Okay, right. In which case, we're going to wrap things up for now. As you can see, I'm in the UK now, so my shelf is lighting up quite well because it's getting quite dark in here now. I need to go and turn the lights on. I always forget when I start. And if you've got any questions or queries, jump onto the chat. There is a dedicated chat for, where are we? There we go. The code time chat. There you go. It's going to come over my face. The code time chat there is for all talk about this specific stream, or you can simply jump on the Discord and you can ask general queries. There is a dedicated content builder help channel. So that, and also to point out, that channel is only for the content builder, not for the old content editor. For that, go back to regular help. That way we don't cross the streams, as it were. But anyway, I've loved having you all here and chatting. And thank you, everyone, for joining. And we shall catch you on the next stream.